So you want to know who the best Sigurd units are. Alright, so in this tier list, I'm going to be ranking the units, or units, in terms of how good they are on Sigurd. Now the main thing Sigurd gives you, or the main things Sigurd gives you, are Canter and Canter Plus for free, Momentum and Momentum Plus damage, mostly just Momentum damage. Momentum Plus allows you to deal over 10 damage when moving more than 10 tiles, but base momentum allows up to plus 10, so most units aren't going to be getting momentum plus damage. At best, they'll be getting some degree of momentum damage below 10 move. You also get some dex, you get some build, you get +1 move, and you get some defense. So he helps dex builds, he helps with build fixing, he helps with canter, you get momentum damage, and you also can't be frozen. So these are all, movement-based advantages. The primary advantage of using Sigurd is movement. Okay, so Alchrist on Sigurd. I would say this is just okay. Assuming that Alchrist is on his main class, which is generally his best class, he's not going to be that useful on this. You're basically just using this for the canter and momentum damage. The build fixing doesn't really help him. Most of the bows in the game are light enough that they don't really slow him down much anyways. The only bows that really do slow him down are like Brave Bow. I think Silver Bow doesn't even slow him down, so his build is high enough that he doesn't need the build fixing. He can't really do too much on this. It will give him some extra damage, but there's better things for him if you're trying to use him full time. I don't think he's that good on this. Alir on Sigurd. Now, assuming you're overinvesting in Alir, which you basically should because it's a force unit, I would say this is great on like Wyvern. Like on Wyvern, potentially Warrior. I don't really like to run Warrior, but Wyvern or Griffin, it could be pretty good on, depending on your passives, but you can get early like Lance and Sword power, assuming your tier 3 and tier 4 wells early on go well, which they may or may not. But usually you can get like a Sword power, Lance power 2 or 3 on at least one unit. So if you get that on like Griffin or on Wyvern, you can easily run Sigurd and pop off. And obviously when you get Sigurd back, you get Lance power back. So by that point in time, you should have some more SP just from leveling, and you should have more SP books from welling. Alfred, I think he's good on this. Like, he's not fast, so he needs speed fixing. The issue with Sigurd is, in order to capitalize on Sigurd, you either need to have insane utility or really good damage and speed, or really good speed. Because you're either going to need speed fixed, damage fixed, or both, or you're going for like some kind of crit build or whatever. But in the case of Alfred, his speed is like quite low, so you'd have to put him on something like Wolf Knight, but now he needs like a little bit of speed and also some damage, so you could run like speed +5 Wolf Knight with Lance power like 3 to 5, and he should be doubling and one rounding fairly consistently. But this would be like not the best. It's not horrible. I would say Alir is much better, because Alir, if you're choosing to run Alfred, he's just much worse to the units, but the result would be okay. It'd be like acceptable. Amber, I would say, is like similar. Amber has high strength and kind of like low base speed, similar to Alfred, so you need to fix him in a similar way, but he has more strength, so I think he'd be better than Alfred on Sigurd. Anna, you could run Anna on like Mage Knight, and she would be good. You could also run her on Sage or Griffin Knight with like sword power. You could get the sword power early, or you could go for, like tome use or something like that, or Sage, and just have her be like a Thoron poke unit. But she makes you money, and she's quite fast. Like, she's reasonably fast. If you invest in her, she could pop off on Mage Knight on Sigurd. Now, you would want to run something like sword power and like speed +5, and she'd probably be okay. The Sigurd gives her build, which helps her wield Levin sword weightlessly, and she also has high speed, so you add speed +5 into that. She's one rounding easily on Levin sword, she's doubling easily, and then she can canter out, so she can kind of bob and weave. So this would be pretty good. Definitely would be overpowered. It would just be really strong. Boucheron on Sigurd, probably just another okay unit. He has low strength, and he has like above average speed, but not high speed. I think some people get confused when they like evaluate Boucheron. He's actually not as fast as it seems. He's definitely faster than most of these like medium speed units, but he's slower than the actual fast units. He just has high build, and build can be made irrelevant if you use the right weapons, so I would just say he's okay on Sigurd. Cooking Man, probably similar, just like, run-of-the-mill. He's not doubling for the most part, but he could use like great weapons, I suppose. and probably have a decent result. He's not the tankiest of the tanks. He's just kind of okay. Maybe I'll put him in good, because he could at least use great weapons and shrug off damage to some degree. Probably have a better result than these. Saline on Sigurd. Some people like it. I'll put it in like B tier. She gets the override damage from being on Mystic, so she can override with Levin Sword, and that can one-shot a lot of things. But that could also be done with other weapons, so it's not like unique to this class. She is quite slow. Or I'm sorry, she's like medium speed with build issues, so Sigurd helps offset her build so she can wield Levin Sword more weightlessly, and she does need more speed fixing than other units, but she could potentially do okay, or like have like a good result. Okay, Chloe on Sigurd. I think it's overpowered. So Chloe, if you just give her like even speed +3 and lance power on Wyvern or Griffin or Mage Knight, she'll pop off. Like, she'll just farm. Some people like to run her on physical, but she should really be on like Levin Sword Griffin or Levin Sword Mage Knight with like early sword power 2 to 3 if you can manage. Otherwise, you could put her on Wyvern and use like Steel Lance, Silver Lance, Fencelar, Reposalis, and get lance power, you know, early or later, because like you can get it mid game and she'll be fine. She'll be one rounding without lance and sword power, like early through mid game, and then as you enter like mid to late game, you can get her lance power and she'll be fine. But she's actually really good on Sigurd. Citrine. So Citrine is high base magic. I'll put her next to Amber. I'll put her above Amber. So she could just do hit and run tactics, make use of the momentum. You could also, well, if you take her from Sage to Mage Knight, you get +1 move, and you would be able to get more consistent momentum damage. So, but you'd also lose damage, I think, a few points just by being off Sage. So you'd have 6 move on Sage, so you get +6 damage from momentum. Then when you engage, I think you get +5 more, so you can get up to +10 to 11 damage. So she could go for like Super Thoron pokes, and that would be decent. Maybe it would be A tier. Super Thoron pokes. So let's see, what would the build be? So you're Sigurd with Momentum Plus. You would run Gentility Plus and switch it to Bravery mode for +5 damage, and then early Magic Plus like 2 to 3. Maybe that's actually A tier. Maybe she can one-shot just off of that. Because I know most people don't combine Magic Plus and Gentility Plus. I was going to make a video on that, so I'm kind of spoiling future videos. But they usually run like Reprisal or some DLC nonsense. But that's like an organic, non-DLC way of hitting one-shots. And then you could run Ike on it too, but then she needs hit fixing, so that becomes the issue, right? Maybe Erica, just go for the crits, I don't know. You would want something to increase hit and damage. Potentially Leaf Engraving, because the Leaf increases hit and damage, but you increase weight, but she's not doubling anyway, so who cares? But alright, so let's move on to... Oh, she could also Dire Thunder on it, I suppose. Which would be decent, because Dire Thunder is always good. So I guess she's fine in A tier. Clan, I think he'd just be okay. He's a good physical unit, and apparently he can be decent on Mage Knight. I haven't run him on Mage Knight, but I'm taking people's word for it, because I understand the math. He's definitely not as good as like Anna on Mage Knight or Chloe on Mage Knight, and he has terrible magic growth as a mage, which is just awkward, but on physical he could be good, and on Mage Knight he'd be decent. Diamant on this I think would just be okay. He's too slow. It would probably be, here I'll put him in low B. He'd probably be like a great weapon build. Just go for a single hit for a lot of damage on whatever class he can get squeeze as much damage from as possible. Etier on this, I think, is like the level of Alchrist. I think they're about the same. She's slow. She has 40% strength growth that everyone overhypes for some reason. I don't understand it. He also has 40% strength growth, and he has 45, so it's like, why? Like, she just has worse stats than these, for the most part. But yeah, she's frail. She has okay strength growth, but outside of that, she doesn't bring much to the table to justify using her. But if you were to use her, running her on Sigurd, she could go for single hits, but she can't shrug off damage, so she can't really use great weapons, and she can't really survive any hits. So like if she's in the fray at all, like the thing with the Sigurd unit is you want it to be able to at least tank a single combat, because it's going to be out attacking things and cantering, and being in danger. So the unit has to be able to survive. Now, obviously, if you're super Thoron poking, you're hitting at 3 range. So that's pretty safe. Now, she could do that with like a longbow or something, but longbow damage is quite bad. And I just don't see either of these popping off on it. Fagato on Sigurd, I think would actually be quite good. He has high speed, he has good build, and he has like pretty average combat stats aside from that, but speed and build can be damage fixed no matter what. So any unit with high speed and high build will always be relevant in the game, and with basic speed improvement, they'll always double like pretty much everything the enemies have, every enemy on the enemy team. So that being said, he's a pretty solid combat unit, probably better than Citrine, honestly. She would require a lot to get online. You just slap the emblem on him and he'll start putting in work. So definitely better. I think the Anna result is better than these though, because she makes you money, and that seriously matters. I feel like a lot of people undervalue, like, she's a good combat unit that also makes you money. She's like one of the only things in the game that actively makes you money, which is kind of cool, but also kind of weird. Fram on Sigurd. Fram is actually a good Mage Knight. I'm putting her next to Clan. She's actually a pretty good Mage Knight. And it's not that hard to get her up and running because she staff bots herself into level 10 for free, basically. Gold Mary. I think Gold Mary could be good at this. I think she could go for like single hits or big damage or doubling with speed fixing. You'll have to feed her a speed wing, but Gold Mary's base speed is like 20. You give her a speed wing, you're looking at 22. You get +5 speed passive, you're looking at like 27 speed. And then plus the build from Sigurd, everything is now basically weightless for her. She has the Brave Assist, she has the momentum damage. She would actually be a pretty good bruiser on Sigurd. She'd be pretty legit. All right, and then for Hort on Sigurd, she would be okay at it. She's not the most damaging unit, but she's very fast, so she could hit doubling benchmarks and use things like Bolganone better. Actually, maybe she would be good on Sigurd. She actually, the more I think about it, she could use Bolganone and it wouldn't weigh her down. So she could be on like Sage, Sigurd, Hort with like speed +5, and then maybe Bravery plus. So it's +5 damage, +5 speed. You get momentum damage. She could also just be like a Thoron poker, but she's not going to be as good as Citrine on this. But she could go for doubling on Bolg, and she is a very fast unit, so... Or at least like an Elfire build or whatever if you want to do that. But if you want to get her on Sage and then put Bolg on her and go for doubling, you get build from Sigurd that helps increase your speed. So that would offset the speed loss from her main class. Her main class cannot use Bolganone, so something to keep in mind. Ivy on Sigurd. I feel like she wouldn't be doubling as consistently. I'll put her in A, like high A tier. She's not going to be doubling as consistently because she usually wants like Lin or like some heavy speed fixing. And Sigurd gives you mobility, but it does not really give you that much damage. And it does not really give you speed fixing. So if you're going for a doubling build, you either want your emblem to help give you damage or to help give you speed. And in a way, Sigurd gives you some damage with the extra damage from momentum, but not like a substantial amount of damage unless it's like, you know, the momentum damage scale is like some ability or something that one shots or one rounds. So I think she would be good on this. She would probably have to run like Speed Taker to then get to around like 30 speed after getting, you know, 5 kills. But if she did that, she would be pretty strong. Definitely not as good as Chloe, because Chloe is fast enough. Now, if you throw her on Mage Knight and run her on Sigurd, she probably could be overpowered, but because Lindworm is slow, you're not going to be doubling, like unless you're using tonics or if you're doing like Byleth Speed Instruct or Byleth Super Instruct or something like that, then I would say it goes up, but in of itself, it'd just be like really strong. Jade, I would put her next to the tanks for the same reason, great weapons, hit and run tactics, shrug off damage. Jean, I can see him being okay. I'll put him in low B tier just because of his startup costs, but he could be decent on this depending on his class. Kagetsu definitely would be similar to Chloe. He has speed and he has decent damage. So he has high speed and he has average damage, which means he's doubling, and doubling with average damage is great. So he would definitely be like one of the better users. Lapis, I'll put her like here. She's like a lesser Chloe. She's not as accurate. She has slightly higher damage, less bulk. Chloe actually has a high health growth for whatever reason. But she's a pretty good unit. She'd be good on Sigurd. She's good on like Wyvern. Louis, we'll put him next to the tanks. Lyndon, I'll put him like next to the mages. Let's put him there. Next to the mages. And then, alright, Mavier on Sigurd. He would be decent at it. I think you can change his class to make him faster, but like fixing his build for the past couple of chapters, I feel like some people overhype how good like Vale and Mavier are, because if you dump a bunch of resources into them, they can just be about as good as your other units to some degree. But it's not like it's easy to build them, and it's not like you can just hand them engraved weapons because other things are using those things. So I usually find that you're better off just like using the SP they start with and then giving them whatever's left over type of thing. So I think that's a real, like his availability always hurts him in any tier list because his availability is horrible. And, you know, he's not like one of the best units in the game for the past couple chapters. Like Vale is a strong unit and Mavier are strong, like they're strong units, but they're not like so broken and overpowered they carry your playthrough. You get them for like 3 to 5 chapters. Marin, I think she would be overpowered on this. On Wyvern, I've used her on this. She's literally Kagetsu, but with like 1 or 2 less strength. She's exact same stats. Pandreo, Panette. Panette could do hit and run tactics, getting her crit up. So what she could do is get Wrath, you know, take some damage, so then she can get up to like plus 40 crit, get the crit engraving on a killer axe, and then the momentum helps her. So she could actually be pretty cracked on this, like hit and run crits. Hit and run crits, hit and run doubling, hit and run doubling. I think these are all kind of obvious. Rosado. Honestly, Rosado would be decent. He has kind of low strength, like 16 strength, but he could use axes with Sigurd, and they would weigh less because of the build increase and the free canter. So he would be able to double, at least go for doubling with things like hand axe, maybe tomahawk if he gets enough speed. He could go for doubling with like silver axe, Noaton, maybe the well axe if he can use it. I can't remember if he can on Wyvern or not, but he could at least go for like Noaton axe power, and that would be fine. He could go for doubling, or he could go for like single hit and run. He could probably shrug off a little bit of damage. He's on Wyvern to start. Now you can switch him to other classes, but him on like Wyvern is already one of the best classes, so maybe you'd switch him to Warrior. I don't know, but Warrior, Wyvern, axe power, hit and run tactics with silver great axe, or just like tomahawking, even if it's just a single hit, like momentum tomahawk, momentum silver great axe. Going for doubling, maybe not so much, but because he's on a flying frame, because he's kind of fast, he could kind of go for doubling, kind of go for single hit. I could see it working. Saphir, I'll put her with these. She's just kind of slow. She has decent strength. Well, actually, she doesn't. She has the same strength that Panette starts with on Warrior. So let me put that to bed right now. And Amber can hit Panette's strength by the time you get her, just by leveling him normally without exploiting the game for XP. So can't really say that she's gonna pop off. Dancer. The Dancer on Sigurd is actually pretty good. So if you don't want to have a Sigurd dive unit, you can just throw it on Sadal, and then he can just like dance and then get Canter Plus, so he can move like 6 and then dance and then move 3 when you get Canter Plus. So he essentially has 9 move, and he'll always be with your army, even if you're hyper aggressive. And then he can also engage to move very far to dance from across the map, so that's very useful. So pretty decent, actually. Tamara on Sigurd is definitely... I'll put her in low S tier. So, alright, so why is this good? Alright, first thing, she gets momentum damage. Second thing, it increases her dex, which increases the probability of sandstorms. So if you're going for, you know, hitting multiple times, you get more sandstorms. The other thing is Sigurd has a Brave Lance that it weighs less than the normal Brave Lance. And you can also damage modify it for free, given the free 20 gems you get for everything, 20 orbs. So you can increase its damage and its hit rate, or even increase your speed by 2 when using it. And then with the build and the speed plus 2 and the hit rate increase, or the damage. So here's what you do. You take your free 20 orbs, you get 15 for +2 damage, 15 for +2 speed on Sigurd's Brave Lance, and this is a build I made recently. And you have +2 speed, you have a build increase from Sigurd, you have Canter Plus for free, you have a Dex increase, you have momentum damage. So now and then you run Lance Power and then speed +5, and then you can double pretty much anything. You can one round pretty much anything just off of the Lance Power damage, and you can also go for Sandstorm triggers for higher health targets if you're not killing with Lance Power, or if you're attacking armor. So it works, the build works, like you basically have a weightless Brave Lance. It leverages his engaged weapon. You can also use a normal Brave Lance, you can use like Fensalar, you can use Javelin. It's a really solid build that takes almost nothing to get online, and I just fed Tamara like 40% of one paralog from base, and got her from base Tamara to a working build that was killing in chapter 20 consistently. So, and I had to feed her, I don't know, 2,000 SP in SP books, and the rest is just from leveling in her base SP. So, not that bad, actually. Maybe 3,000, but yeah. So she can really pop off on Sigurd. She's one of the best Sigurd units. And when you override, you can trigger Sandstorms. I had a single override trigger 2 Sandstorms and kill like 2 enemies that she wouldn't have killed otherwise. So pretty good. Vander, let's just give it a D tier. There's no reason for it. Vander on Sigurd. The main problem with Vander is his bases and growths are just bad long term. So as he levels up and enters the mid game and end game, he just naturally falls off, and it takes him forever to level until you hit like the middle of the middle game. So like, I don't know, chapter 16 to 17 is when he starts actually being able to level up, but his growths are really bad and his bases are bad. So ultimately he's just hard to use, and he just suffers from stats and growths. Veil on Sigurd, I'll put her in low A tier just for availability, but she could be good on like Griffin or Mage Knight. When you switch her out of her base class, she actually is decently fast, and you can give her like speed +3 to 5 to get her doubling consistently, maybe get her sword power like 2 to 3 on Levin's sword on either of those classes, and you have a pretty good combat unit. Yunaka on Sigurd. I want to say it's like here. Well, actually, so all right, so let me move these. Let me make sure I didn't miss anyone. All right, so Yunaka is an interesting unit in that if you just leave Micaiah on her and just have her stay as a Micaiah bot, I was able to get her to like level 16, or no, I'm sorry, level 20, level 19 by like the end of chapter 11 from just having her Micaiah spam, not even like XP farming, like just great sack and then just go for kills and then enemy phase a bunch of things. So she like enemy phased a lot of the starting enemies on avoid tiles in like chapter 10 and like chapter 11. So she can get to a high level without like blatant XP farming, just by like using her in terms of like enemy phasing and avoid tile tanking. And once she hits level 21, you can second seal her into like Mage Knight, Wolf Knight, whatever. And on those classes, like on Mage Knight, I feel like she'd be A tier. On Wolf Knight, she'd probably be A tier. Let's put her like here. The thieves have a weird start because they have to be leveled to 21 and then they have to be like second sealed. So like it's not like you can just quickly switch them and then they, you know, master seal into whatever. So they have this like specific thing. But when she was on, I did run her on Mage Knight, she was okay. Maybe she'd be like low A tier or high B tier. I think that's fair because her magic stat is low. Now if you put her on Wolf Knight, her strength is also kind of low. So and he's kind of similar. He has strength, but he doesn't have speed, and that's an issue. He doesn't have high strength. He has he has average strength and he has average speed. So he has just kind of like generalist stats, and he doesn't really pop off as much as some of these other units. Let me make sure I didn't miss anyone. Oh, I can do DLC units, I guess. This would be assuming you're not running other DLC, like you just unlocked them, because I don't like the DLC emblem rings. They ruin the game completely. Like I find the base game already like not too much of a challenge. I mean, I've beaten it so many times, it's not a surprise, but even before that, they just give you too much. You get too many extra resources, too much XP. It trivializes too much of the game. But let's assume you unlocked these and you're just running base game, which you could do. So Gregory, he's similar to Citrine. Put him next to her. Madeline, she's just another tank with high strength, so she'd be one of these. Nell, she would be like, we'll put her in low A tier. Rafal, he's similar to Panette. Put him there. And then Celestia, she's similar to Ivy, but I think she's faster, so maybe low S for now. Alright, so here's the Sigurd tier list. Feel free to agree or disagree with any of these and make an argument as to why you think these are too high or too low. But definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and feel free to become a channel member. We also do live stream from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. EST, and I stream different Fire Emblem games, and I might start streaming Starfield when that comes out because I'm going to be covering that. But yeah, thanks for checking this out. Peace.